I'm Lisette, and this is Book Date. Today we are talking with Maria. Maria, I'm going to butcher your last name. Say it for me.
It's Guglielmo.
Guglielmo. Okay. We're talking with Maria Guglielmo. She writes in a couple of different genres, but the most recent series is sci-fi male romance. And it is a fun read. I've started going through some of it and got to say, truly an enjoyable time. So Maria, why male romance? I mean,
Yeah,
sci-fi, I get. I read way too many aliens, but why male?
right. And I would say it's probably for most readers, even though they're sort of technically aliens, I would say most people would consider it a shifter romance. You know, it's set in sort
Mhm.
of a near future world. There's some aspects of climate change in it, but usually it kind of appeals to people who like the shifter books. And so I've kind of, gotten into that niche. And I guess why is just I like to write what I like to read. I don't write what I know at all. In fact, as we were talking about, I'm a physician and I don't write medical romance. I don't write nonfiction medical stuff. Well, I mean academic papers notwithstanding. So I like escapism. I like kind of a big canvas, big stakes that you can throw really quirky and interesting characters into. So I've been reading a lot of male romance and came up with the idea for the series. On a Riff's Edge is the second book in the series. And it's just been, a blast to write. It's been really fun.
I always feel like that really comes through when you're reading a book, is how much fun did the writer have writing this? You can tell. I mean, the middle is always a slog when you're a writer. That's harder. But if you can really capture that joy throughout the book, yeah, then that's everything. Okay, we're going to get into On a Riff's Edge. Do you want to give a little bit of background as to that story world? Because I found it fascinating.
Yeah. So a bit of a backstory. So this kind of came to me when I was on a dude ranch in Arizona. Right before COVID and shortly after COVID.
Oh no.
So I am not a dude ranch person. It was my first and only time. I'm sort of afraid of horses.
Oh no.
Um, my kids had a great time. Like the horse bounced me up and down. But so I was just kind of thinking of this sort of city slicker, cowboy kind of dichotomy. And I was also thinking, in COVID, that concept that we're just getting used to like an apocalypse, and like what other apocalypse would we get used to? Like monsters were coming out of portals. Would we get used to that? So that's basically the basis for the series. Monsters have been coming out of portals for about 25 years now. It's kind of accepted. Some of the portal areas are tourist sites, and there's sort of a bit of a truce going on. So it's not The Last of Us. It's not hardcore dystopian. There's aspects of climate fiction in it, but it's mostly kind of a fun look at that sort of situation. And so I have basically a spy who kind of has seductive powers, a little bit incubus like, and he works for an alien mafia that bases themselves after vintage mafia movies, even though they're giant rat aliens. So they have a whole structure like the mafia, and he's sort of infiltrating this, the very prestigious and wealthy draconic, or dracones, I call them, but like dragon type society at the Dude Ranch. So he's sent to seduce a veterinarian at the Dude Ranch who's very well known. And that doesn't go too well. And there's a lot of twists, as you could imagine. So it's got a little bit of enemies to lovers, although, one of the characters doesn't know that the person that they're getting involved with is an enemy. And I tried to, kind of put a lot of humor and keep it light, but also kind of get into some of the trauma that the characters have had, kind of a backdoor way of trauma, and how they kind of came through that. And in the end, they can kind of accept one another. So that was sort of it in brief, I guess.
One of the things that I really liked about your world, and your world building, is that you have this sort of apocalyptic, portals are open and aliens are showing up and whatever. But it's not dystopian. It's maybe because it's 25 years later, or maybe a whole host of reasons. Everybody's learning to get along, which I feel like is the story we need in our time right now. Found that very, very interesting and made it. I'm not a dystopian reader at all. Like, for the most part, don't like them. Like, started the Hunger Games, couldn't finish it. But I know that there are a lot of people that do like that. This was warmer, which makes it sound trite, and that's not at all what I mean. It was, no, even with this, huge cataclysmic event, there's still a way to get together, move forward. The humans and the aliens coming through the rifts and whatnot, not always, but I mean, because there's tension, but find a way to get along and have over the years have worked to cement cement relationships. So that was cool. I loved that part of it. Okay, we're going to get into the questions that I ask readers on Build a Book Boyfriend. There, we're using them to find their next perfect book. We give them 5 options. But in this case, I want to find out more about your reading habits and how those influence your writing. So the first question, what's your favorite book?
Right. An incredibly difficult question to ask. So I thought for this, I thought of a series. So I'll pick the first book in the series. It's not paranormal at all. It's historical romance. But in terms of male romance books that I've just read and listened to the audiobook over and over and just love it, it's the Will Darling Adventures by KJ Charles. The first book is Slippery Creatures. And if your fans don't know KJ Charles, please drop everything and discover her. She's unbelievable. And so I had to pick that. And you can ask me more questions why, but that's my story and I'm sticking to it for today.
I have to say, I did not consider the occupational hazard of doing this, that like, oh, my to be read pile is going to get so much bigger. It's not fair. But anyway, yes, because everybody's recommending books that it's like, oh, I don't know that person. Oh my gosh, I have to know that person now. Anyway, so next question. Why is it your favorite book?
So what the sort of touch points that I really like in the book, first of all, it starts off in a bookstore, which, I'm a sucker for bookstores. And the character in the bookstore is completely not the character you think would be in a bookstore. Basically a man who has a type of PTSD from World War I. Well, that doesn't come out later. He was a trench fighter. He killed a lot of people. He's pretty rough around the edges. He's very blue collar. And so he gets involved with someone, Marquise's son. I may be saying that wrong. So even in the 20s, the 1920s in Britain, a huge class gap between the two of them. And the other character is sort of, you think at the beginning the exact opposite. He's slippery, he's devious, he's a spy. He, kind of betrays Will at every turn, and they have this incredible physical attraction that then turns into something more. So it has this element of sort of enemies to lovers, which I always like. I've learned a lot more history through KJ Charles, especially of Great Britain, than any time in school. And it's just a fascinating look at that period in history with a really good adventure story. It definitely has some, it's definitely a mishmash of historical romance and thriller, because there's a thriller component to it, which is great.
Okay. All right. That sounds fascinating. And I actually, I like World War I romances. So it's surprising to me that I hadn't heard of it. So we've got what your favorite book is. We've got why. Now, what are your favorite tropes?
Well, I think we've probably said enemies to lovers like 5 times. So yes, so I do like that. I also sort of like star-crossed lovers in the sense that they come from families or things coded as families that are in tremendous conflict. So that's, something that they have to overcome. I really enjoy that, coming from backgrounds, everyone around them would not want them together. I really enjoy that kind of conflict. Sometimes some of the cute stuff is just fun, like little clever versions of Only One Bed or something like that. That's just always enjoyable. But I really like there to be sort of a lot of genuine, like, how can these two people get together? Like, I like it when it seems impossible in the beginning. Just not to say I don't have some friends to lovers books and other things like that I really enjoy, but I really like there to be obstacles, like the characters have to work for their HEA.
It does, as a writer, It's funny, I don't write a lot of enemies to lovers at all, but I can see how as a writer, it would make it the enemies to lovers sort of gives you built-in tension and gives you built-in conflict. Whereas if they're best friends to lovers, you gotta come up with a really good reason why they haven't gotten together before this. So your favorite tropes were enemies to lovers, uh, a a little bit of what I in my head call the Romeo and Juliet factor. Families would loosely defined hate each other. That's a major obstacle to overcome. Yeah. Okay. Great. Last question for this. What genre are you reading right now?
So right now I'm reading paranormal romance. There's a very fun series, SOS Hotel by Adam Vex. Adam Vex is the name of a character, so it's a fun pen name for Ariana Nash. It's the cover is kind of a ripoff of a TV series, Has Been Hotel, which I would know nothing about except my 15-year-old daughter and my 22-year-old daughter were all fans of it. So I saw bits of it, and it's like, demons in a hotel and kind of this goofy but fun male romance. It's actually, a lot of that stuff does get quite more raunchy than you'd think of an animated series, but it's very well done. It's an adult animated series.
With animation that you can't necessarily get away with actors.
I'm staggered at what they got away with. Very, very well done. I don't know a lot about animation, but you can tell it has a really distinct and beautiful style. And the books are really more on the laugh out loud side. So
Okay.
they're definitely meant to be comedic. It's a type of dark humor that I enjoy, with kind of this, so what if the demon was a porn star kind of thing. So very light. Kind of when you need to get away from what's going on in the world and you want to dive into this book. So I would say I've really enjoyed the series. I think she meant it to be shorter, but it was a big success. So now she has some other things coming out. So I'm reading, I forget what this is. It must be the 5th or 6th one in the series that I'm reading.
I've moved over to reading almost exclusively alien romance of all different types. Yeah, because who wants to read about the real world? I just no, not right now. Okay, so those are the questions that we ask readers. Now and I'm especially interested in this because you said you're currently reading paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
And you write, while it's got sci-fi elements and all of that, you're essentially writing shifter books. Which
Mm-hmm.
would be shelved as paranormal. I always find it hard to read read the same genre that I'm writing. So I am really interested in hearing how all of that information, your favorite book, why it's your favorite book, the tropes you love, and the genre you're reading, how all of that affects your writing, what you're writing now.
It usually gives me like 3 or 4 different ideas that I don't have time to sketch out. And I'm like, oh, I love this character, but what if I could make, something like someone like this character do something different? I don't find that it bothers me too much with the writing. I know I've heard people say that. I doesn't bother me too much to read in the same genre. I just have usually I have like several stories in my brain, and it's they often just will not go away unless I put them down. I know other writers, it sounds really terrible, but I've heard other writers say the same thing. So when it's on the page or when I've written it or working on it, it does get out of my brain. But that's a long process to get something out of your brain. So, but I would say that, it comes and goes. Like I had a year where I was just plowing through a whole bunch of romances, and I'd say last year was not as much, like a bit of a book slump. I'm also doing something else. I'm like getting certified in book coaching. So there's been a lot of nonfiction writing that I've been reading that's kind of different for me. So, but there's a bunch of like really fun books by writers I'm really looking forward to, including several by Kate Charles, who she announced that she was coming out with them. So I'm really excited for this as a reading year as well as a writing year.
And I'm sure you had this happen to you. You're at a cocktail party and it comes out that you're, a writer or that you write romance, and people are like, oh my gosh, I've got a story you need to write. And it's like, sweetie, even if you gave it to me, it's at the end of a very, very long list. I've got more story ideas then I have time left in my lifetime. I don't need your idea. I'm happy for you to go ahead and write it. There's plenty of romance readers out there. Please write your book. But yeah, it is always amazing to me that, people are like, oh, wait.
The ideas. Oh, my Rhode Island accent coming through. Where do you get the ideas? And they're all over, but then putting them down on paper and taking these snippets of scenes in your brain. And I have been spending a lot more time just learning different techniques of plotting and structure, which I kind of didn't want to do in the beginning. And that's actually been very helpful. It's not exactly exciting reading, but I have found that it has helped me rather than, meandering along. I'm mostly a discovery writer, so it gives me a little bit of a better framework. But I think I'll always be somewhat of a pantser or somewhat of a discovery writer, if you want to use the nicer term, because I love that first draft. Like, oh my God, I'm going to put in a giant frog monster who turns into a really hot guy. He's got to speak Spanish, and he's got to be, boom. And that's what happened in On a Rift's Edge. I have a character in there, which a number of readers have mentioned to me in their comments. And I don't know, he was supposed to come a few books down the line, and he just hopped right in there.
That's the worst.
Tree
Like
frog we have, and there it was.
When you have characters that just won't stay in their lane, and it's like, no, you were supposed to be a spunky side character that I then did not have to worry about, and now you've got your own full-fledged book. How did this happen? So anything else we have not covered? I've loved this.
Right. I think you wanted to get into a little bit of like the whole topic of male romance, and I don't know if you want to.
I would love to. Yes. So Maria and I were talking a little bit before I started recording. I have friends who write male romance. While they may have gender neutral or even male names, a lot of times the writers of male romance are in fact women, and they're writing for a predominantly female audience. I'm not saying there are no men that read them, but predominantly female audience. And it is fascinating to me because, and we were talking about this, it is one of the few areas where you actually have a predominantly female gaze. So that's my sort of, shtick. Give me your take on that area of Romancelandia.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's controversy there, and that's not a bad thing. Sort of a question of staying in your lane or writing the other. And I've always kind of felt that, again, I want to write what I want to read. I don't want to read a book where everyone's cishet and able-bodied and white and suburban and, all of these things, I want to read a book with a lot of diversity, but it also has to be done right, and that's a lot of work, but it's also a great learning experience. On the other hand, I think when it comes to the theme of the book, I would not tackle a novel, whether it was fiction or anything like that had certain themes, like, just homophobia in general. Like, I don't think if that was the theme of the book, I could do it justice, or, right, other things like that. So I sort of focus on having diverse characters, doing the best job I can with them, try to be open if people are not, don't think I did a good job, and try to learn from it. But I want to see more of that in the world. And we see that now where, our little Romancelandia, oh, look at our, male books, our sapphic books, our poly romances. Well, they're under attack, And I mean, there's even threats to jail people who write them. So I think sometimes as writers, particularly romance writers, we kind of take in this negative atmosphere, and what I would say to all romance writers, regardless of their gender or sexual orientation, is your words matter. They matter as much as literary writing, and literary writing also means a lot. And so I think we need to embrace that, but we also have to take responsibility for doing a good job, and getting feedback.
In the middle of a very cis hetero series, 16 book series, I have a male romance. Again, had one of those side characters that was supposed to be a throwaway, and literally had people writing me saying, when does Kevin get his book? I was like, Kevin already got his happily ever after. No, he's done. It's like, no, when does Kevin get his book? We want to hear that story. And it's like, oh, come on, guys. I didn't have a story. He met the love of his life and he's gone. But realized quickly that there was a story there. But again, while I'm the mom of a bisexual woman and my house was where all of the genderqueer kids hung out and all that, I'm not. I'm very cis hetero, make no bones about it. And, so I had, you had mentioned having a sensitivity reader read your books. And yeah, so I had a friend act as a sensitivity reader, and especially because there were issues of homophobia, but all of my books sort of have found family as a big part of them. And this one even more so. So he read it. He's like, it's good. Yeah. You show these two guys having a completely normal relationship and they love each other and they end up with this family and they end up creating this family. He's like, that's the dream. It's, and you show bad things happening, but how they overcome them and whatnot. So it's, there's stories. I feel like now they are stories that need to be told. I mean, I was explaining to somebody, it's like I don't know if you watched Star Trek growing up, but the communicators that would flip open and they'd like talk into them and close them. And how is that any different than our cell phones now? I mean, like you need to sort of have that, you need to have that fictional, that belief element in fiction to normalize all of the stuff that is happening in our world, that, no, those are real people. They are all around you and whatnot. So yeah, I absolutely, when I put a call out for people to interview, I said, if you are underrepresented, if you're BIPOC, if you're, LGBTQ plus, if you write in those worlds, I want to talk to you. And that's, absolutely still true. Absolutely true. All right, Maria, this has been fascinating and I've loved talking to you. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. Was there anything else that you wanted to say?
No. So On a Rift's Edge, is the second book in the Rift World series. It is available on Kindle Unlimited on Amazon. The first book in the series is called Drifted Hearts, and feel free to check it out.
And there will be links to those on a Rift's Edge along with the podcast notes. Thank you very much, Maria.
Awesome. It was so nice talking to you.